Hey everyone, welcome back to my next video and to watch me experiment with polymer clay. I did a previous video where I did my first impressions of using polymer clay because it is a totally new medium to me and I'd never touched it before. So I will link that in the description below if you haven't already had a look at it. And for this video I'm going to go on to techniques of colouring the clay that I've learnt about and also baking the clay, because although at the end of the last video I said I was going to bake it, I didn't. I wasn't brave enough, so I'm going to do that in this video so that you can see me doing that process and hopefully it'll give me a little bit more confidence to actually get it done. So enough talking and let's get on with the experimenting for today. For today's practice with the polymer clay, I am going to incorporate some of the things that I came across while looking at other YouTube videos, and I haven't baked the turtle that I made previously, so we're going to use him for this practice purpose. And the reason I didn't bake him, one is it seems a scary process and I didn't want to ruin him, and two, I then looked at the YouTube videos and realised I could give him a bit more dimension rather than just keeping him a flat colour. And this is achieved by using things like mica powders. So I found these in my craft supply set. So those are some shiny mica powders. And then soft pastels, and these are just effectively chalks, and what you do is you use a sharp knife and you scrape the dust off, and then you use that dust to brush onto your piece to give it some dimension. So that's what we're going to get on and give a go. I'm going to start by using the soft pastels and try and break them down into a dust that I can put over the turtle to give it some dimension. So that I don't make a mess all over my work surface, I'm going to use a piece of cardboard that I had lying around, and I'm going to shave the dust onto the cardboard so that it doesn't make a mess everywhere. Already it's flaking, so I can see why they suggest using this. That slightly has a sound of nails down a blackboard, but I will persist. I'm not going to do too much because that seems like once it's been crumbled up, it actually seems like quite a decent amount, so we're going to just start with that to start with. I've gone for a lighter shade of something. I've gone for pink versus the purple so that we can hopefully see it show up, and from what I understand you just dust it on. Now although that's not come out as the same colour as the chalk, it could be because it's such a dark purple, it has one, smoothed the finish, and secondly it has just given it a bit of dimension. It's made it not so flat, so I've been putting the powder in on the top edge and it's just given it a little bit of dimension, and yeah, I quite like that. What I've done there is just used a clean brush just to dust away any of the excess colour so that we're not getting it in places that we don't want it, and I quite like that effect. Like I said, it's not the pink that it's appearing there, but it has given it some dimension. So let's carry on and do some of the other segments. Ran out then, so I've just replaced it and tidied all the spare dust up. So I'm going to continue going. Again, using a clean brush just to dust away the excess that I don't want in places that I don't want. White to this pink to see if I can get it to lighten up. A bit paler, and we'll see what it looks like when I apply it. So I am having my doubts on whether this is going to work. It just seems to be really quite messy, and I'm actually not getting as much colour on there as I thought I would, although actually looking back onto the first couple of sections that I did, the colour seems to have come out over time. So whether that's like the oils from the polymer clay seeping through and making it more of a colour, so we'll see as we go whether it changes these lighter colours into a more brighter pink. What I'm going to do is just colour the heart using some of the mica powders. I've got quite a pretty ready pink there. I think I'll do that in the middle one, and then I think I'm going to bake him and see what difference it makes and see whether adding the pastel at this point is the right thing to do, or whether I should wait until it is baked and then I can build up the pastel colour a bit better. I'm only using the remnants in the lid because there is more than enough there. Just gather some of that up and press it onto the heart. Super carefully, because I don't want it to be shiny anywhere else if this is the way this works. So I'm trying to just keep it in the area that I want it. And I think what I'm going to do is just dust some of this on the cheeks so that it gives it some shiny cheeks. Rosy cheeks. I've probably gone a little bit too far over, but this is just a practice piece. I have to keep telling myself that. So I'm going to go away and bake him and see what it turns out like. So this is my oven, and the setup that I've got is it's just a small toaster oven, and the temperature goes down as low as 100 and even lower. So I've set it to where I think the temperature should be right for the clay, and according to package instructions, the right temperature for this clay is 110 OC, so that's what we're going by. I do have a oven thermometer. It is the one piece of advice that kept jumping out at me with regards to getting your pieces baked well enough. So I'm going to put that into the oven. And the other part was, the other bit of advice that I kept finding was people were saying to protect your piece by using a couple of layers of other things so that the heat isn't radiating straight onto your piece. So I've got a baking tray underneath the grill. I'm going to put the tile and the turtle onto the grill, and then I've got a tin foil container that I'm going to place over the turtle in what is called a technique called tenting. So I'm going to tent the turtle so that he's not totally in the direct heat of the oven. So the first thing I'm going to do is preheat the oven before I put him in, and then we can see what happens when we bake him. So that's ready and preheating, and hopefully the thermometer will tell me that it's at the correct temperature, if I don't mess around with it too much, in about 10 to 20 minutes, so I'll come back and check on it then. While I'm just waiting for the oven to heat up, the one thing I forgot to do, which I had seen being mentioned, is actually between the tile and your piece of work is to put some sheets of paper, because the tile can get super hot and basically bubble the clay, and we don't want that to happen. And it sounds a bit dangerous putting paper into the oven, but going by everything that I've seen and been told, it is perfectly okay because the temperature isn't going up particularly high. The paper, nothing will happen, and people use the same pieces of paper over and over again without them burning. So I've put my pieces of paper between the turtle and the tile, and when the oven's heated up, I'll put it all in ready to go. Okay, so just after 20 minutes of waiting, the oven thermometer is now saying 110. So it's the oven isn't accurate to the oven thermometer, and that's why they say to have a thermometer, because they are more accurate than the temperature gauge on the oven. So I've almost got it up to 150, but it's only just sitting around 110. Now the other thing that I've done, which you'll notice on the top here, is a ceramic tile, and this was another piece of advice that I was given when I realised after about 10 minutes this wasn't really heating up. what I picked up on is if you put some ceramic tiles on the top, it insulates the oven and stops the heat being lost, so it also regulates the temperature. So I'm trying to keep it as even as possible so that my little turtle cooks as evenly as possible. So we're now going to put him into the oven. Being careful not to burn my hands. And I'm going to cover him up with his little tent and leave him in there for the 35 minutes that it's recommended on the pack. I am going to stay, well, 30 minutes. I am going to stay in the vicinity so that I can keep an eye on the thermometer and to make sure that the time doesn't run out. So let's put that up to 30. It may be that he will need a little bit longer because he's slightly thicker. So I'll determine that after the 30 minutes, but I'm going to hang around and we'll come back once he's cooked. Okay, so we've almost got down to the 30 minutes that is suggested, and I'm going to have a look. My consideration with this, if this is turning out okay, I am going to leave it in longer because it is slightly a thicker piece. The information that I've obtained is that the longer you can leave it in, the better. So let's have a look and let's hope that it's not burnt or bubbled or anything disastrous. So he actually looks okay, so I am going to put this back on and leave it for a little bit longer, maybe another 10 minutes, and hope that that sets him up properly. And as you can see there, the paper's not burnt, as we said it wouldn't do. And we're going to increase it by another 10 minutes. Okay, so the timer's gone off and I'm not going to risk taking it any further. So the next point is just to check that it's not gone anything too bad and it still looks okay. And then I'm advised that you just leave the oven door open just slightly and let it totally cool down. And then we can come back when it's cooled down and remove the piece from the oven. Okay, so I've gone and retrieved the turtle from the oven and it's just so surprising to me. I have never worked with polymer clay before. I knew what I was told to expect, but until it happens, you don't quite believe it. And I can't believe that the paper didn't burn. He has turned out hard and he just came up off the paper. There's slight grease marks on the paper because, you know, that's what the whole baking process does. It bakes off the polymers. And yeah, it has left the colours slightly more vivid than they were. The mica powder has been rubbing off, but not totally. So I think once it's covered with a glaze, that will work brilliantly. What I'm going to do now is just define the lines using the pastels again, and then that will give me an idea of if there's a difference between using the pastels on the unbaked clay to the baked clay. So let's get on and do that now. So as I've kind of been experimenting and researching, there are just so many ways you can colour a polymer clay piece. There are ways that you can colour it before you bake it, after you bake it, pastels, dry or wet, because the chalk powder, apparently you can wet down so that you're left with a little bit of a paste, and apparently that gives you a better pigment. Again, that's something I will try in the future. You've got the mica powders. Again, those are something that you can wet down to get a more vivid colour, although this has actually come out quite nicely. So for this little bit, just to darken the lines, I'm going to just use the dry pastels, sticking with the same theory that I did before I baked it, and we'll see what it turns out like. The reason I'm doing his feet is because there was some of the pink powder was down on his toes and I wanted that just to be totally purple, so I'm just rubbing some of the chalk dust into his feet to cover that up, and it seems to be working quite well. So I can see why you'd put the powder on after it's baked. colour definition of the pink and the pale pink didn't really turn out how I expected it to. I'm going to try going over it with just the chalks again now to see if I can emphasise that a bit. Doesn't seem to be working, so I think personally on this the base colour was too dark for me to put anything lighter on, so that might be something that I have to consider for future projects, is that I start with the lightest clay that I'm going to do and then I can darken it up, because adding purple to the purple has covered up the light stuff but it's not let me cover up any of the dark. But again, it is a practice piece, so I shouldn't really expect it to be perfect. He's cute, but just not quite perfect. So the one thing I have left that I can do now is to glaze the piece. And what this does, in theory, is to stop all the colour from coming off, and it just gives it a little bit more structure. The glaze that I've got is this Sculpey gloss glaze, so I'm going to add some of this to the turtle and see if it works. Using a clean brush. Oh, it's quite watery and it's also quite milky looking, so but from what I've seen that just all dries and it dries clear, so let's add some onto him. Back and the different segments, the first thing I'm quite impressed with this glaze is that it's not shifting the colour, it's keeping the colour in the places that it is. I just thought putting something wet onto some colour would move it around, but it doesn't seem to be, so I'm impressed with that. I've said that, I can see that there is some pink gloss that's gone on, so there must be some colour shift but not noticeable enough to make a difference to the clay. Maybe if you were using white with some of these colours you'd notice it more, but because it's the purple it's not showing up too badly. So here's my first effort at a polymer clay creation, and the gloss glaze says let dry between 30 minutes between coats and then fully dry after 24 hours. So I'm not going to bore you with the process of this one drying completely, and I'll show you the finished product in another video where I might decide to add another coat to him just to even out the bumpiness and make the gloss glaze even. So this has definitely been a journey of ups and downs, because at some points I'm thinking, oh, it's just going to be a total fail, but then I have to remind myself that it's the first time I've ever used this medium and that I am just going to have to keep practicing, and this is not going to be a short-term battle, it's going to be a long-term goal to see if I can perfect the skills with it. So I will be back again in the future with another video of the next processes of experiments that I'm going to do with polymer clay.